I challenge you to a duel. We shall fight the sport of kings. We shall honor the great old ones in ritual combat of single-action, ocean, liner, battle. That's right, baby! The ancient sport of piloting a ship 300 meters long like a true gentleman. A ship of class and sophistication filled with all the amenities a gentleman desires. Turkish bath, swimming pool, fencing arena, smoking lounge, and the very finest of dining experiences. Covered in a dazzling array of whatever weapons we happen to find lying around at our closest naval shipyard. As challenger, I have the right of first pick. And obviously I have taken the pride of the Empire, the SS Great Eastern. I have filled its decks with machine guns, 5-inch guns, missiles, and of course the mightiest weapon of the British Empire, 111 16-pounder guns. Yeah, baby!
I hate it already, and it's only been a few hours. I'm so tired. We get up at 5.
At first I thought they'd handed me the wrong dossier. I couldn't believe they wanted this man dead. 3rd generation West Point, top of his class, Korea, airborne, about 1,000 decorations, etc., etc.
I loved you in Wall Street! I'll handle this, mate. Oi, fish face! Do something! Hey, Scungili! Got it! Come to negotiate, eh? Have you, you slimy git? Look what I got. I got a jar of dirt, I got a jar of dirt, and guess what's inside it?
Having survived the Baltic, our heroes made their way towards Britain, where they encountered a small group of fishing trawlers at Dogger Bank. But surely by now our skittish sailors have learned their lesson.
Ninjas! Streliate this bullshit!
Chaos ensued as the Russians laid down hellfire upon the unsuspecting fishermen. The Russians are going bonkers. Some run around the deck aimlessly waving cutlasses to repel imaginary boarding parties, while others just cuddle up on the deck with life jackets, accepting their demise.
Keep it up, men!
These Japanese have horrendous aim, Igor. We haven't even taken a hit. But hey, at least this time we made sure they weren't fishermen first. We're shooting at fishermen, aren't we? Definitely a possibility, sir. Well, at least we didn't fire on our own ships, killing a sailor and Russian Orthodox priest.
Hey, jetzt sind wir die Tommies.
It's a long way to Tipperary. It's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary. Die Platte wird doch ihre Welt anschaulich unternehmen, den Schaden einzuholen.
Do you see those 2 weevils, Doctor?
I do.
Which would you choose?
Neither. There's not a scrap of difference between them. They're the same species of calculio.
If you had to choose, if you were forced to make a choice, if there was no other response
Well, then, if you're going to push me, I would choose the right-hand weevil. It has significant advantage in both length and breadth.
There, I have you. You're completely dished. Do you not know that in the service, one must always choose the lesser of 2 weevils?
Let's talk about this guy. This is John Paul Jones. John Paul Jones is handsome, Scottish, and absolutely insane. When the war first broke out, everyone was like, how did the colonies expect to stand up to the might of the British Navy with their meager fleet of converted merchantmen? Yep, try telling that to John Paul Jones. This guy sailed to the British Isles, somehow captured a British ship off the coast of Ireland, and brought it back to France. Then he returned, attacking more ships, raiding towns, and evading capture the entire time. These are basically pirate tactics. But hey, If it works, it works. In one incident, he captured a British ship and returned to a Dutch port without an official ensign because his was lost during the battle. That's a big no-no and can have you arrested as a pirate. The Dutch helped him out by quickly creating a design based on Benjamin Franklin's description of what the American flag should look like, and they entered it into their records as an official US flag. What they came up with looks pretty cool. The whole campaign probably played heavily on British morale and brought into question their ability to win the war. And fun fact, he was so cool that one of the towns he raided in 1778 gave him an official honorary pardon in 1999.
It's the wonder of nature, baby!
History. How is everybody doing tonight? How is everybody doing? Let's just quietly fade that out. Well, welcome to the 29th edition of Uncut History. Let's see who we have in the chat for this edition. Well, we got Maji Chan. Welcome to the show. We got Wrangler, who has dropped a 420. Wow, that was the sickliest 420. I apologize. I guess my throat's going a little dry. I mean, I've been numbing on some delicious peanuts before starting to stream, so maybe that's why that was a little dry of a 420. But nevertheless, you would say you're okay, but I'm never okay. Well, I use that response every morning at work. You can't use that response. That's my response. Oh, and I apologize in advance. You're going to hear some noises from lovely Wendy Weiner, one of our cats, because it is bedtime here at the Readout Productions household. And Wendy Weiner knows exactly when it's bedtime. I kid you not. I don't need a rooster. I don't need a rooster to tell me to wake up and go to sleep. She knows what time of day it is. She knows the clock. And she knows when it's daylight savings time as well. It's pretty freaky. But that is a whole other story for another day. Then I will use this. Greetings, salutations, and other big words. Very good. Very good. So, tonight's stream. So, I knew what I wanted to talk about tonight, and that is the fact that there is a research team out in the Pacific Ocean currently. They're doing a big mapping of. I'm going to have to pull the notes up later to pronounce the location. This big underwater reserve, essentially, in the Pacific Ocean, where the Battle of Midway occurred from the Second World War. And since they're over there mapping the I guess you want to call it the undersea life, they decide to also heavily document 3 of the known shipwrecks from the Battle of the Midway. So we'll talk about what they've been finding. So I'm very excited. But then I decided, well, the past week I've been doing a lot of research about some War of 1812 naval battles, so let's just turn this into one giant maritime stream while we're at it. I'm no big expert on maritime history. I focus on infantry when I come to military history, but why not for something different? So, well, Ringo drops on. There are like buttons. Yes, there are like buttons to hit right here. If you're watching on YouTube, right here, you hit that like button and let the algorithm that runs this website, let them know that history is important and people like being educated. And I also am dual streaming on Rumble. So if I type that in, hit the Rumble, Ginger watching me doing this in real time. It is so painful, I'm sure. And Vringlesy Studios is over there in Rumble as well to say, get in here, guys. There's There's plusies to be pound. Do they even call it that anymore? Because they got rid of the plus and minus symbols. Now it's just a thumbs up and thumbs down. But I guess we're still calling it that. I'm actually very quickly gonna drop the link to the Rumble, because I do have a Rumble page. And if anybody here is watching the stream live or watching the replay, and you also have a Rumble channel, do a big favor if you want to follow me on Rumble as well. I'd like to start growing my channel on Rumble as well. It's a very good, it's one of my backups in case everything goes haywire on YouTube. I got a good backup. But with that out of the way, enough diddle daddling. I'm going to go right into our topics for tonight. So we were talking about the Battle of Midway. Now, I've kind of talked about the Battle of Midway on the channel. There's no full video on the Battle of Midway yet, but in the past, I have talked about a ship because I made a... God, why did I make this video? This was one of my many attempts to try to get myself, basically ghost myself on YouTube. It's like, and in this new attempt of this historian alienate himself from all of his audiences. Yes. So I did a video back in February called Oscar Langley Soryu, and the idea was it's going to be a series of videos relating Neon Genesis Evangelion characters to naval history, because every character in Neon Genesis Evangelion has their name alluding to some sort of warship or some nautical terminology. Like I think Ikari, the last name of the main character, is anchor in Japanese. Well, Asuka Langley Soryu is the perfect embodiment of these illusions, because she has two last names, both are alluding to key aircraft carriers from the Second World War. And for bleeps and giggles, I also looked up, was there a ship named the Asuka? And there was actually a research vessel in the 1990s named the Asuka. So I got 3 ships in this one video out of a gag idea of, let me just take an anime character and see if I can make a history video. I'm actually... I shouldn't be guilty of this video. I'm actually pretty proud of it. This was one of the hardest videos to edit. I edited this whole video off an iPhone because I did not have my tough gaming laptop that I now currently operate off of. So I have a slight fond memory for this video because of how much effort it took to edit this and make it look coherent and not like it's edited off of an iPhone. The only reason I'm bringing this up is that if you do want to hear me talk more about the Battle of Midway before we jump in, I do have a video that talks about one of the carriers, the Soryu. So some of this stuff may sound familiar later on tonight, but we're not going to be talking about the Soryu. We're actually going to be talking about 3 other characters, and that is the USS Yorktown, the IGN Kaga, and the IGN Akagi. So our story tonight from the Nautilus Live website. So the Ocean Exploration Trust, whose founder and president is Robert Ballard, who will be important a little bit later, they are currently out in the Pacific Ocean doing basically a month-long mapping of this portion of the Pacific Ocean. And while they were out there, they decided to go and with their HD cameras photograph 3 known shipwrecks from the Battle of Midway. Now, what is the Battle of Midway? I've been rambling about it, I haven't explained it. Well, in short, I'm losing my mind already. In spring of 1942, the Japanese Imperial Navy was going to make an attack on Midway Islands. And there are these 2, tiny islands. I think the one island is as large as my little property that me and my family live upon. It's not big. It's these 2 little islands, but they have strategic importance during the Second World War. They can be used by either side as bases to launch air raids on enemy positions, be it the Imperial Japanese Navy wanting a supply base to launch attacks on Hawaii or even on Australia and upon the west coast of the United States. And for the Allied forces, especially the United States, Midway is a strategic stop so they can launch air raids on Japanese occupied islands that they'll eventually going to attack later in the war. Now, the Japanese Navy thought that they had kind of battered the United States Navy, partly because of the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, and several major sea battles had since ensued, and they'd actually thought they had damaged several carriers, including the USS Yorktown. So they figured, all right, we're going to go to Midway, we're going to take it out, we're going to wipe out whatever's left of the U.S. Navy. Couple problems. the USS Yorktown was not sunk. It was still around, as well as the USS Enterprise. It was also around. The U.S. Navy had free carriers that they can go and rapidly attack Midway. The U.S. Navy also knew that the Japanese were going to attack Midway due to some code breaking, so the Japanese thought they would surprise the American Navy. In reality, the Japanese Navy are walking into a trap, and the U.S. Navy are waiting to spring it. So one set a trap, the other, everybody's setting traps. And what ends up happening, the U.S. Navy catches the Japanese Navy off guard, and in the ensuing battle, 4 of the Japanese Imperial Navy's aircraft carriers are sunk. They're gone. I believe, 6 carriers were used to launch the attack on Pearl Harbor, and its carrier fleet, which was called Kita Batai, which reigned terror on the Pacific Ocean the first few months of the war, it lost 2/3 of its fighting force in this one battle. It was devastating, so devastating to the Japanese Navy. It took several months for the Empire to announce to its people that they had been defeated in this battle. So they actually didn't tell a lot of people what had happened to their sons. Why weren't they coming back home? Well, they're at the bottom of the ocean. It took a little while for the Empire to admit it. That being said, it wasn't a completely one-sided battle. The United States Navy also lost a carrier, the USS Yorktown. Though it had survived an earlier engagement, it only got about 72 hours of repair, was sent back to Midway Island, and was attacked by Japanese airplanes. And ultimately, the U.S. Navy had to let it sink. There was no way they were going to be able to tow it back to Pearl Harbor. So this is considered one of the, if not single most important naval battle of the 20th century, perhaps in recorded history. Now, it wasn't until 1998, so just a statement, there were 5 carriers sunk in the Battle of Midway, 4 Japanese, 1 was American. It took until 1998 for anybody to actually locate any of these carriers to try to figure out where their final resting place was. Robert Ballard, the man who's famous for finding the RMS Titanic, was able to locate the USS Yorktown in 1998. And then I believe I was reading in 1999, some early surveys by the U.S. Navy, they found debris relating to Japanese carriers, but they weren't certain which ones they were. And then in 2019, the RV Petrel, which was a research vessel, was actually being financed by Paul G. Allen, one of the co-owners of Microsoft. They, using sonar, discovered 2 Japanese carriers and likely believed them to be the Kaga and the Kagi. The Kaga in particular was the flagship of the Japanese Navy going into the Battle of Midway. Now, just because these ships were discovered, there really wasn't good documentation of the wrecks. Ballard's team in 1998 were limited by the technology of the time. It was still analog technology. So the photographs they got were not the greatest quality in the world. And the only things we had relating to 2 of the 4 Japanese carriers were sonar scans. So here in 2023, the Ocean Exploration Trust, we go back, they are out at the, I have to find a name. It's a long name. It's a long name. Yeah, the whole plot's falling apart. There we are. I'm gonna have to pronounce this. The Papahanaukomikagi Marine National Monument. This Marine National Monument, so this is actually U.S. waters, according to what I'm reading. This national monument is one of the largest underwater reserves in the world, but that a government is preserving. So they are currently out here. The Ocean Exploration Trust are out there mapping out the whole monument, at least from what I've gathered, this whole reserve. I call it a monument, but when I think monument, I think of like a statue. It's a reserve. It's a giant body of water that you're not allowed to be in, essentially. So it doesn't destroy the wildlife. And since they're there with all this high-tech equipment, they decided we should go and photograph these wrecks and also confirm a few things. Because as I mentioned, Allen's team got the side sonars, were confident these were Japanese carriers, but they didn't visually confirm what carriers they were. So everybody was saying, we presume they're the Kaga and Kagi. We don't know. Well, it's safe to say that after their research, they did multiple dives with ROVs, remote operating vehicles on the free wrecks. We can confirm the identities of the Kaga and Man, I'm getting my names confused. I'm sorry. The Kaga and the Kagi, and we're able to get the first images of the USS Yorktown in 25 years. And we're just going to play this a little bit here. I'm going to drop a link to the full video. They have been streaming live their entire research. So though they're done with the shipwrecks, they're still doing their mapping on the ocean floor. So if you want to go over to the Nautilus's YouTube channel, you can watch them live. They're going to be doing this project, I think, through the end of the month. Starts September 1st. I think it's running through the end of the month. So there's the link. Oh, totally different person there. Frequency Studios, not Wrangler. Totally different person. All right, so we're just going to play this a little bit. I'm not going to have any volume on. If you want to watch the full video, you may. This is actually the bow of the Akagi, and there's actually, it's really hard to see, but you see those white dots there at the bottom. I believe this is either, I want to say this is on the hull of the ship. That is the kanji spell in Akagi, and they did confirm it. They had a translator that you can see it. It spells out Akagi, so they have found the wreck of the Akagi. Something interesting about these two Japanese carriers they've located. In the 1930s, when the Japanese decided they want to soup up their navy, they were still having to follow very strict guidelines that 5 different countries were agreeing to, including the United States, that we will only have so many ships, we'll only have so many carriers, we only have so many everything, and this was to avoid another world war. Yeah, that didn't really work out too well. The Japanese were not happy with this. For obviously, they felt they were being kind of held down, so they started finding ways to get around the restrictions. What they ended up doing was they had these battleships and battle cruisers they were building, and when they were told by the Washington Naval Conference, you can't build these, oh, they're not battle cruisers, they're aircraft carriers, because there was certain loopholes in the conference that didn't cover it would cover battleships, but it wouldn't cover aircraft carriers, because in World War I, aircraft carriers, they really weren't a thing. Nobody thought about air power was in its infancy as a military use during World War I. So nobody thought of any importance of the aircraft carrier. Well, the Japanese exploit this loophole. And for the record, all the 5 countries exploit this loophole, and they build up their carriers. Why I'm telling you this, you see that gun right there on the Akagi? That is, you wouldn't find that on an aircraft carrier on most during World War II. That's a freaking gun for a battleship. That's fully built into the hull of this aircraft carrier. So these first aircraft carriers, these were super ships that the Japanese Navy were rolling out. They were aircraft carriers with the bodies of battleships. And again, the United States Navy did this as well. So these were pretty big hunks of metal. This was not some flimsy machinery, which made the aircraft carriers at the start of World War II the most important warships that any Navy had, especially the Japanese. The Japanese Navy, the pride of the Japanese Navy, were their aircraft carriers. Their advantage at the start of the war was their air power. They had the best air power in the Pacific theater at the start of the war. So they were able to identify the wrecks because the Akagi and the Kaga, they were both built to be battleships or battle cruisers. So they have these big, monstrous hulls, far too bulky for an aircraft carrier. But they were in the experimental phase. So these 2 wrecks are very important in terms of the technological development of aircraft carriers around the world. These were some of the first, most powerful, most successful aircraft carriers ever constructed. And what you're seeing right now, that is part of what we would call the island. If you've ever seen an aircraft carrier, you have the flight deck. Then off to the side, you see something jutting out. That's where like the communications tower is. Unfortunately, as you can see, you can see a lot of damage either from the Battle of Midway or from its descent to the ocean floor. The top half of the Akagi's island has been sheared off. Interesting note, though, the Akagi and Kaga's island, the Akagi's island for certain was on the port side, was on the left side. Most aircraft carriers have their island on the right side. The Japanese Navy were trying to see if they moved the island to the other side, if it would be better, it would be a better design. They didn't really follow up on it. I think there was only 2 that did it. I think the Kaga actually was the other one. They put it on the port side. So if you ever see a photograph of Japanese carriers and you see the island on the port side and not the starboard like you're seeing here of the Yorktown, it's either the Kaga or the Akagi. And here we are on the wreck of the USS Yorktown. The island of the USS Yorktown is fully standing, and most of what you're seeing is battle damage from the engagement during the Battle of Midway, which is just fascinating. A lot of people will comment how when you see a shipwreck, especially from a naval engagement, you can go to places like Gettysburg and see battle damage on buildings. You can go to Fredericksburg and see something similar. You can go to sites on land and see battlefields and see scars from it. It's hard to visualize the scars of a naval battle because, well, the objective is to sink the enemy ship. So when you go to these shipwrecks, this is the only way you can see the battle damage. This is the best way historians can figure out what went down during these naval engagements if it wasn't recorded by an eyewitness. Oh, and very cool back here. You're looking at the very stern of the Yorktown. I can't personally make it out, but when you're watching the video, there's narration. If it might be really hard to see, but you may faintly see the white letters that spell Yorktown out right on the stern. And there you'll see there's some anti-aircraft guns. Yorktown's armament was a bit more lighter than the Japanese aircraft carrier. Still powerful, though. Still powerful. Ooh, this is cool. I don't know if you can see, but that, I guess that the one major line you see, you'll notice it's tilted, and that's because the Yorktown is at a list. It is on a steep angle as it rests on the ocean floor because that's how it went down. It went down kind of capsizing to one side. I believe ultimately what sunk the Yorktown, it had been hit by the Japanese aircraft. It was destroyed beyond repair, and this not able to really tow it in enough time out of the area. The U.S. Navy scuttled it. And that's what happened to, I think, all of the warships ultimately at the Battle of Midway. They had to be scuttled. So they would be hit with the U.S. Navy, the Japanese Navy, their aircraft carriers. They're hitting all these different warships. They would disable these warships. They were all constructed so well. They were such behemoths of metal in the ocean that they were disabled, but they wouldn't sink. So they would stay afloat, albeit a blazing ball of fire. So what ultimately happened is a lot of these navies had to scuttle them. And actually, you're looking into one of the hangars of the Yorktown. Boy, it would be cool if we can put a probe in there and see what's inside there. But like I said earlier in the stream, Robert Ballard did discover this wreck in 1998. But this is the first time since his discovery that anybody's gone down and gotten high-depth footage and photography. And this is the Kaga. Now, this photograph is not an accurate representation of the Kaga during the battle. The Imperial Japanese Navy, when they started developing these aircraft carriers, they would have these multi-tiered flight decks, which they found quickly to be quite cumbersome. I think I'll have to double check. I believe the Kaga went in for a repair job. I'm going to do it really quickly. I believe all the Japanese carriers got a major re-outfitting. I'm reading right now. Yes, so yeah, so the photograph that the Nautilus's team is showing is not an accurate depiction of what the warship looked like during the Battle of Midway. But the Japanese Navy, when they were starting to develop their carriers, they mentioned they were battleship hulls and they're putting flight decks on them. So they were literally just stacking them up like Legos and sending them out, which caused some top-heavy issues. So in the mid-1930s, the carriers were pulled back into port, and they were given the more proper image that we know of a carrier today, just one flat flight deck. But even then, look at the hull. It's massive. It's huge. And I want you to know, right around here, you'll notice it's kind of hard to see the hull kind of V's in and V's out. Take note of that when we go to the underwater footage. Now, the Kaga was the flagship of the carrier fleet at the Battle of Midway. It took 4 bombs from U.S. airplanes. All 4 penetrated through the flight deck and detonated inside. And one of the things that led to the Japanese defeat at the Battle of Midway, again, the Japanese Navy were under the impression they had the element surprise, which is not true. The U.S. Navy knew they were coming to Midway. So they were outfitting. They were outfitting these bombs to be dropped on the island of Midway. And then they got word that there's a U.S. carrier fleet nearby. So the admiral, the Japanese fleet, authorized them to switch the ordinances, or authorized them to switch from bombing to torpedoes, so they can destroy the ship. They can destroy the U.S. Navy ships. This cost them valuable time, and when the U.S. planes did come over the Japanese fleet, they were still in the process of changing out the ordinances, reversing the ordinances. So when these U.S. bombs hit warship or carriers like the Kaga, they penetrate. It's a powder keg. There's bombs, torpedoes everywhere in the hangars of these aircraft carriers. So not only do you have the U.S. bombs going off, then you have them igniting all the other ordinances that are on the flight decks, which is why the Kaga, what they have discovered during these surveys, it is blown to bits. The whole flight deck is gone. Everything everything flight deck and above is gone on the wreck. And you can see it's a pile of twisted metal. It's unrecognizable for most part. But I want to see if they show a good image. And actually, if you look right here, that's the ocean floor. That's the ocean floor. And you can also see there's the top of the carrier. So it is burrowed into the ocean floor. Imagine the speed that must have taken to the ocean floor. It's just crazy looking at this. This is why they're doing these surveys, to show you the devastation of these naval battles. We're so accustomed to seeing war damage from battles on land, but we don't really realize how destructive battles at sea are. So that is just something I thought was really cool. I'm going to drop a link to the article if you want to read more about it. There's a better photograph you can see of the USS Yorktown, of how it's listed onto one side. And there's another good photograph of the Kaga's ordinances, some of the big guns from its days when it was supposed to be a battleship. So I'm going to drop that link. Indeed, it is a mangled mess. All right, so we're going to take a little bit of a side trip here. Now, I wasn't going to talk about this, but since we're talking about the Battle of Midway, I might as well talk about a carrier that was named after the Midway. So the Battle of Midway is considered the turning point, at least in the Pacific theater, for the United States Navy. And it was a long road to victory, but after this, they had devastated the Japanese carrier fleet. And the United States would start building bigger and better aircraft carriers to match the Japanese Navy. And one of those built near the end of the war is the USS Midway, named in honor of the Battle of Midway. It got under sea in 1945, so it only served a limited part of the World War II, but this carrier actually served World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, and I believe it served during Desert Storm as well before it was ultimately commissioned in the 1990s. So this carrier served almost a half century through several key engagements in United States American history. This was considered by some to be one of the, if not the most important carrier in the U.S. Navy, including my father, who served on it in the mid-80s. So I have a little bias to it. So let's just read a little bit. Our exhibits. With more than 30 restored aircraft and nearly 10 acres of exhibits and displays, the Midway brings to you the most complete cross-section of carrier aviation in the world. From high up on the bridge, down on the main engine room, taking you on an unique warship journey that engages the sights, sounds, and aromas of the symbol of American freedom. Hangar decks. So the carrier now resides in San Diego, California, and it operates as a museum about the aircraft carrier and U.S. naval history. So it's not just about the ship itself, but about the whole history and importance of carriers in warfare. And I believe they have a full display just on the Battle. Yep, full display right on the Battle Midway. Before you visit our holographic theater, take time to interpret our interactive displays on the Battle Midway, including our carefully restored F-4F Wildcat and Dauntless dive bomber aircraft. That's just a photograph. Different stuff here. Command Information Center. Walk through the Command Information Center. Helicopter history. Can I just give a little bit of a general history? Let's see what that holographic feeder is. During your visit, be sure to experience Midway's 90-seat feeder featuring a riveting multimedia movie about the Battle of Midway. This 15-minute immersive film tells the story of one of the most important naval battles of the Second World War. The battle is relived through the eyes and voices of the heroes that bravely took part in this historic episode of American history. And they got a trailer here. So it looks like it's a mix. They use a mixture of archival footage. And I believe, what Hollywood filmmaker was? I want to say it was Mr. Ford. That was the one that was actually, I want to say it was Ford. That was the one that went to Midway, was sent there by the U.S. Navy Department because they knew that there was going to be an action there to get footage of battle. So the Battle of Midway is the weird distinction of being one of the best, like, documented battles on film because there was an actual filmmaker on the islands. He didn't catch any of the action at sea, but the Japanese aircraft swarm in the island. So yeah, this is how the Midway is honored, and it's pretty common. You'll hear a lot of warships in U.S. Navy today named after battles. The USS Yorktown was named after the Siege of Yorktown, and actually, for some reason, they brought they used the Yorktown name on another carrier. Thankfully, this one did not sink. And I believe it's also a museum. I believe it's also a ship museum. I might have a better chance of seeing the current USS Yorktown because I believe it's on the East Coast, where this one is on the West Coast. So pretty far from me, but there is familiar attachment to it. So I had to shout it out. Since it's the naval stream. So that's a good question. I see what you're thinking. So it is an air battle predominantly, but you have to understand the main part of the battle was that these two United States Navy fleets are coming in with their carriers and then launch an aircraft to attack the other carrier fleet, if that makes sense. And there actually was a U.S. submarine that got in the Japanese battle lines amongst the Japanese carriers, though they were not, I don't think they were successful in hitting anything. So there was some pretty close action, but no, for the most part, the U.S. carriers and the Japanese carriers did not see each other. They were dozens, I forget, I don't know, again, I'm not too good on naval history, but they were far away. They were out of view of each other. So it's crazy to think about these battles being fought in World War II, these naval battles where the warships are not seeing each other. They no longer do that anymore. They send these planes to the other fleet and then hope the planes can take care of the enemy fleet. But again, the Battle of Midway strategy was the Japanese were going to surprise Midway Island, take out the U.S. base there, make that a base for themselves to launch attacks on Allied islands and Allied mainlands. The U.S. Navy intercepted their messages, decoded them, and figured out where the Japanese were going to attack. So they staged their own surprise attack. So when the Japanese started attacking Midway Island, the U.S. Navy launched their planes after the Japanese fleet, forcing the Japanese planes to be recalled back to the Japanese fleet or start targeting the American fleet. So yeah, it was an aerial battle, but it's a naval battle in the sense that all the planes are coming from warships. They're all coming from warships, which makes it just a fascinating battle. All right. So we're just going to deviate briefly. I want to shout out somebody right now. So this is whimsyland.org, and this will interest those that are more in offers. And one day I'm going to have to contact this guy for literary coaching. This is Whimsyland, which is ran by Daniel P. Riley. Yeah, Mauji, Wrangler. I know who they are. So, take your story from possible to published. Is your dream to be a published writer? Most writers won't take the leap. Their stories gather dust, unfinished, unpublished, unread. Whatever it might be, lack of confidence, inconsistency, writer's block, fear of rejection, they let their stories pile up along with years of regret. Will that be you, or will you take the leap? Will you make it real? With literary coaching, you will. So Daniel P. Riley has formed Whimsyland. I want to say like Whimsyland Studios. It's just Whimsyland. Has formed Whimsyland for literary coaching. And there's a couple things he offers. Learn to write consistently. Stop redoing your first chapter. Get your stories into readers' hands. My name is Daniel, and I am here to help. Yes, he's totally the guy with the white beard. That's totally Daniel Riley. He's an old wise man. I know the challenges of being a writer. I can feel frustrating to have a great story but be stuck behind a wall. Maybe you don't know how to structure a plot. I know how this feels. When I started Whimsyland, I wanted to help writers to get past their biggest challenges and live their dream of being published like I have. Over the years, I've struggled on my own to understand the mysteries of drafting, editing, and publishing. I searched for someone to answer my questions. Now you don't have to. I'm here to help. So, Daniel P. Riley of Whimsyland provides literary coaching for aspiring authors, aspiring writers. You can sign up to schedule a call with Daniel. Then you guys can formulate a plan on how best to go about to improve in your writing, and then he will assist you in your journey to publication. He also provides editing, proofreading, ghostwriting, marketing blurbs, and short story editing. So I'm going to drop that link for anybody who's a prospective writer or has written something and just really haven't had the courage to publish it, or they know something's wrong with their plot, their story, and they need editing on it. Be sure to go to Whimsyland, ran by Daniel P. Riley. I need time. I need time to write. I need time for a lot of things. I need time. I need a lot of time. I think Floyd wrote a wonderful song about time and how it takes away, the moments are fleeting, things like that. I'm not going to start singing the Dark Side of the Moon album. So let's just keep talking about naval history there. So I just want to give a little, before we continue, I just want to give a little shout out. Daniel Riley, he's been part of the Iron Age community for quite a while now. I'd say, honestly, he's one of the cornerstones, and he has been a big help in multiple ways, not just for his literary coaching, but this is one of the ways he helps aspiring authors, aspiring creators out. So I don't know why, but this was weird. This was like over a week ago. All of a sudden, I started getting interested in a War of 1812 battle. Now, I have an interest in the War of 1812. I always have an interest in obscure American conflicts. I've always seen it as the war that came to the war that basically was one of the most important wars in America's culture, because tactically nothing was really gained out of the War of 1812. Everything went to status quo as it was before the Americans and British troops started shooting at each other. But you got the Star Spangled Banner coming out of it. Famous figures like Winfield Scott and Oliver Hazard Perry, who we're about to talk about, they're going to come out of this war. Tippecanoe and Tyler too, the slogan that led to the election of President William Henry Harrison, came out of this. There was all of these big events that come from this one war. So culturally, this is a very important war for the United States. Well, I started thinking about this particular naval action, the Battle of Lake Erie. And I couldn't figure out, why do I think about this all the time? I kid you not, I'm like, wait, when was the battle fought? September 10th, 1813. It's September 10th, 2023. Weird. So, I don't know. My brain now must be rigged to subconsciously remember anniversaries of battles. So, past week, I've been just starting to do research. Just no real reason, just for the interest of the Battle of Lake Erie. And in short, the Battle of Lake Erie was fought between a small American fleet of warships and a small fleet of British warships on Lake Erie in September of 1813. Why is this important to any of us? Well, control of the Great Lakes was key to deciding the war. The United States wanted to make Canada part of the country, and they felt the Canadians were going to welcome the United States. Yet it didn't go over too well. The British wanted to defend Canada from the invasion from the United States, and the Great Lakes was this important waterway to decide who was going to have possession of Canada. Now, initial efforts by the Americans in 1812 and 1813 were quickly thwarted, and the British started launching their own attacks into American territory via the Great Lakes. So now the continental United States, particularly the northern portions like New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana, are under direct threat because of these Great Lakes. So throughout 1813, they started bringing these naval officers to the Great Lakes because they knew we're going to have to do battle eventually. Well, the problem is Neither navy can bring their warships to the Great Lakes. You can't bring a warship from the ocean into the Great Lakes. It's just impossible because of Niagara Falls. So 1813, these two, I kid you not, these two officers of their respective navies show up on the Great Lakes and begin a race to see who can build a navy first for one battle. They're building a navy to just destroy it in one battle. They know there's going to be a battle on Lake Erie. So the United States sent Oliver Hazard Perry up to take command of building this fleet of ships to go do battle on Lake Erie. Now, they built those fleet of ships in, well, Erie, Pennsylvania. And here in Erie, Pennsylvania, there is the Erie Maritime Museum. I went to this only once when I was very young. I think I was like 4 or 5 years old. I do distinctly remember enjoying my time there. And you can see there on the little map, it's right on Lake Erie. It's right in Presque Isle Bay. And this is ran by the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission. That being said, there is a caveat to that. The museum itself and the building it's housed in are county property, but they have I think it's like a 99-year lease agreement with the PHMC to have the PHMC license, so it's PHMC staff. So the PHMC is a weird entity. It's our state's answer to I've been to other states like Maryland where there are historic sites in their state park agency. In our state park agency, there are no historic sites. They have the PHMC that operates what's deemed historic sites. So state parks are just strictly nature reserves here in Pennsylvania. The PHMC is its own department, which in theory is supposed to specialize and improve historical education. You have a staff just devoted to historical sites. The problem is the PHMC is so badly underfinanced. It is so badly ill-equipped. The state gives next to nothing to the PHMC. So that's nothing on the employees of the PHMC, but our state government's really crappy to our historical museum commission. So a couple of years ago, they closed up several PHMC museums, including Bushy Run Battlefield and the Fort Pitt museums in my area. Those were going to be closed, but local entities took charge of them and have kept them running. So yeah, the PHMC runs on a very shaky financial state. That being said, their staff are great people. So don't think I'm saying anything bad about the staff themselves. So this is a PHMC site, and it is devoted to the maritime history of Erie, Pennsylvania, but predominantly is about in 1813 when Oliver Hazard Perry came to Erie to build a fleet of American warships to fight a British fleet of warships. So we'll go a little bit in here. The exhibits that they have here. Like I said, War of 1812 is a big focus, and you might notice that flag, "Don't Give Up the Ship," very famous from this battle. That was Perry's personal flag that he would fly on his flagship. Erie's shelter harbor made it the ideal place to build Perry's squadron. Shipbuilding and repair remains a fundamental waterfront industry to this day. Our collections hold a substantial number of tools, focusing on the 19th and 20th centuries, telling the story of Erie's longest-standing traditions. For Oliver Hazard Perry, September 10th quickly became the most important day of his life. An Erie-built squadron met the enemy at Putnam Bay, off the shores of Sandusky, Ohio. This exhibit highlights that engagement, from Julian Oliver Davidson's masterpiece to pieces of the very ship which fought this pivotal battle. And what they do here at the museum, and am I going to be able to find a photograph of it? Oh, cool. Virtual exhibits. Please tell me. No, they're not going to have. I'm not going to be able to find it. There is such a cool display. I don't think they're going to have a photograph, though, of it. Okay, I'm not going to find a photograph, but essentially what they did was the museum rebuilt a portion of the hull of one of the American warships, the USS Lawrence. And, well, ultimately, as I read earlier, Perry's squadron did eventually fight the British squadron, not near Erie, Pennsylvania, and we'll get to that later. They duked it out. Perry's flagship was USS Lawrence, and it took intensive gunfire. The crew on that ship suffered the highest casualties during that battle. And what the museum has done, they rebuilt part of the hull of the USS Lawrence and shot live rounds of period ammunition at it. So when you go to the museum, you can see the damage that these artillery pieces could do to these hulls of wooden warships. It's horrifying. It's horrifying. It's just splintered. It's broken to bits and pieces. It's crazy to think about. That's one of the most vivid things I remember. But as the story goes, the Lawrence was shot to pieces, was likely going to be either captured or sunk if it kept fighting. So, not wanting to surrender, Perry got on a lifeboat. He took down his flag, the Don't Give Up the Ship flag. And in the middle of the battle, he had his crew row him to the USS Niagara, got on the brig Niagara, hoisted up, and said, no, the Lawrence wasn't my flagship. The Niagara was actually my flagship. You didn't capture my flagship, Britain, and kept fighting the battle. And I don't know if you can see, but off to the side here, one of my flags I have in the studio of Redot Productions is actually the Don't Give Up the Ship flag. So, yeah, I always love telling the story of the Don't Give Up the Ship flag. It's always a fascinating story. So yeah, that's the Battle of Lake Erie. But the museum goes into more of that. They talk about the commercial sailing life of Erie, Pennsylvania. They have the prow of the USS Wolverine, which was the first iron-hulled warship and was built in Erie, Pennsylvania. And they have a whole display about how the U.S. Navy developed iron-hulled warships, partly in Erie. So the museum goes far more into just military history or War of 1812 history. It's about the general maritime history of Erie, but its most prominent exhibits are about the Battle of Lake Erie. That being said, the Battle of Lake Erie did not occur in Erie, Pennsylvania. It occurred quite a distance away, at least if you're traveling. The National Park Service actually preserves a monument that's as close as you can get a monument to the site of the battle. So the battle was actually fought in Put-in Bay, Ohio. The American squadron was there in the bay to be sheltered from the harsh climate of Lake Erie until they saw the British squadron coming. The British squadron was making its move to capture an island not far from Put-in Bay. So Perry made his move and the resulting battle occurred. And there is today on the island that Put-in Bay stands upon. I know, I just sound really weird. So there's Put-in Bay, which is an actual bay, but then you have like these large islands that jut off from the mainland, from Ohio, and they call the town that's on the main island Put-in Bay. So it gets a little confusing. But at Put-in Bay, they have the Perry's Victory and International Peace Memorial. And this is actually something I've only known recently about. So I've always known about the Erie Maritime Museum. And as a kid, I just presumed the Battle of Lake Erie occurred off the coast of Erie, Pennsylvania. I didn't realize it was all the way off the shores of Ohio, and that the National Park Service actually has a site dedicated to it, but indeed they do. Perry's Victory and International Peace Memorial was established to honor those who fought in the Battle of Lake Erie and to celebrate the long-lasting peace between Great Britain, Canada, and the United States. The memorial, a Dorkim column rising 352 feet over Lake Erie, is situated 5 miles from the longest undefended border in the world. Why are we proud of that? Anyways, visit the memorial. Beyond the memorial's overwhelming presence, there is a profound sense of bravery, leadership, and patriotism when visitors enter the rotunda. Rising to the top of the memorial via stairs and an elevator, then standing outside on the observation deck expands one's view of international peace. That's great. I want to talk about the battle. I don't care about... This is a military history channel. We don't talk about peace. We talk about war. We're crazy people. Us military historians, all we care about is fighting. It's like all we care about is fighting. It's not like we're trying to teach about this fighting so it never happens again. I don't know where I was going there. I think I was trying to defecate on myself, but it didn't work out too well. Anyways, so yeah, you have this tower, and if you go to the top, you overlook basically the waters where the Battle of Lake Erie ensued. And they also do artillery demonstrations. They have a small reproduction equipment on the property throughout the summer to do equipment. Basic info. Place things to do. They also have a visitor center. Let's go check out the visitor center. Here's the visitor center. Watch a 15-minute park video, The Battle of Lake Erie, which you can watch. The orientation film is free on YouTube right now. So be sure to check out the Perry's Victory and International Peace Monuments YouTube channel. Step up to the 2-story window for a view of the memorial and grounds. Explore the many exhibits that revisit the War of 1812 and the Battle of Lake Erie with period armament, peace treaty, and much more. View a larger-than-life sculpture of Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry, attend a ranger program, and a few other stuff. So it's a pretty small park. The visitor center is more there to give information, like how I'm giving information right now about the Battle of Lake Erie. And then you have the big monument signifying hopefully that the countries of Britain, the United States, and Canada never come to war again. Something you might not be able to see, but here in the lower corner of the photograph, that is actually a reproduction of the lifeboat that Perry used to go from the Lawrence to the Niagara during the battle. And if I didn't state it, yes, the American fleet won the battle. They captured the entire British squadron, which is why the Battle of Lake Erie is so revered, and the flag, "Don't Give Up the Ship," is so revered because of the battle it's attached to, and its slogan, its motto. So it was one of the few bright spots for the United States during the War of 1812, because, man, did the U.S. get its butt smacked. We kind of deserved it. We were acting like bratty teenagers during the War of 1812. We really shouldn't have gone to war with Britain, but we got a cool song by Johnny Horton out of it. I do love talking about the War of 1812. It's the Mad Libs of American military history. Where else are you going to find officers from the Revolutionary War working side by side with officers from the American Civil War? You're not going to find it anywhere else. So that's just a little bit about the Battle of Lake Erie. There's 2 locations that commemorate it: the Erie Maritime Museum in Erie, Pennsylvania, and the Peace Memorial in Put-in Bay, Ohio. And something I want to mention quickly, and I don't want to talk about too much because I'm actually going to save it for a conversation with one of my friends for a future stream, but the Erie Maritime Museum is also home to the U.S. Brig Niagara. Yes, the U.S. Brig Niagara is still around. Kind of. So, the Perry's original squadron was sunk shortly after the battle because there was no more use for it, and they really didn't want to get captured by another British squadron. So that's unfortunate. So they sunk ships like the Niagara just not long. I think it was just a few months after the battle. I think the Niagara was around until 1820. They sunk it into Lake Erie, where it sat for well over a half century until the 1870s, when the bicentennial, the centennial, it's late, guys. The centennial of the United States was occurring, and there was a big convention in Philadelphia to commemorate it, and they brought all these big relics out for the centennial, and they decided to raise the remains of the Niagara up and put it on display. That was great until the pavilion was in, caught fire and burned. So yeah, that happened. So yeah, so the ruins of Niagara were raised for the 1876. It caught fire. It burned. I'm sorry, I'm reading. I stalled there. Got burned. Maybe this wasn't the one that got burned. There was a ship at the Constitution Convention of 1876 that got burned, and it's really stupid why it got burned, and I'm pretty positive it's the Niagara. Maybe it was the Lawrence. It was a ship that got burned. Anyways, so I'm breaking. So the Niagara that's around today is not the Niagara from 1812, because the original ship was sunk. It was raised. It was raised in, I'm saying here 1913, so it must have been the Lawrence that burned. I'm sorry about the misinformation. So it was the USS Lawrence that I believe was burned at the Philadelphia Convention, or at least the remains of it. The Niagara was left in the water until 1913. I learn something new every day. It was brought up, rebuilt, sailed around Great Lakes in the summer 1913 before returning to Erie, and then rotting again. And then in 1929, the Niagara Foundation was formed to rebuild the ship. But then the Great Depression happened, so nothing got really underway. And then the hull was relaunched in 1943. At this point, the maturity of the original ship was gone, placed in storage, and turned into souvenirs. And then it sat until 1963 when they decided to restore it for the 150th. And then that floundered until in the 1980s, finally the PHMC got involved, the flagship Niagara League was formed, and they were eventually able to rebuild a fourth version of the USS Niagara. Wow, that was a long story. So even I get confused. Everybody gets confused. So the state of Pennsylvania proudly calls this the ship of the state. And it's a beautiful sailing ship. I mean, you can see from the video here, it is a beautiful sailing ship that still operates on Lake Erie as a traveling museum, essentially, a very good reproduction of the Niagara. But is it really the Niagara? Is it really? How much of that is, and then this is where you get into the ship of Theseus debate, which is something if you replace every part of an item, it's still the original item. But I don't even think you can use the ship of Theseus debate on this because the original ship is gone. It went underwater for 100 years, was raised. There probably wasn't much left to begin with. And then after its runs around in 1913, it was left to rot away again. It was broken up as souvenirs. So our state proudly calls this the original Niagara. I don't like calling it that, but it's still a beautiful reproduction. That is a great tool to teach about the War of 1812, teach about this very important war to the culture of the United States, and it is home port is the Erie Maritime Museum. So okay, all right. That was broken. I scared everybody away. Hey, Ace Burnett. Ace Burnett walked in. What are you doing, Ace Burnett? How are you doing this evening? It ended in a draw. That's all that matters. Looks like I need to visit Royce. Yeah, I'm having one of my Royce moments. Look, it's where we hit the 1 hour mark, and that's usually where I go off the rails of the crazy train. You just kind of got to let it happen. It's a replica. Yeah, I think we're all in agreement it's a replica. Yet don't tell the PHMC that. They're like, no, it's a reinterpretation. No, it's a replica. It's okay. It's a beautiful replica. Probably smells better than the original too. Has probably better sanitary. All right. Now, I would love to do some retracing history videos about the Battle of Lake Erie. And in fact, I'd love to do a whole blitz about the Niagara feeder of the War of 1812. There is so much that happened just along the Niagara River and the Great Lakes, like Lake Erie, from the War of 1812. So many battles were waged. Just along the Niagara River, there were 3 major fortifications. You had on the Canadian side, you had and I'm going south and north, Lake Erie, Fort Erie, Fort George, and then right across Fort George on the American side is Fort Niagara, which is considered one of the best fortifications from the 18th century still surviving in the United States. Many of my friends and peers have gone to see it. I've yet to get a chance. I want to go so badly. If you saw the video, I believe it was titled Flags and Symbols, or no, was it Troops and Symbols of New France? We were talking with a living historian that portrays French soldiers from the French-Indian War. One of their major stops, his unit's major stops, is Fort Niagara. So I've always wanted to go, just yet to have the chance. But maybe one day with the channel, maybe one day I'll be able to have the funds and the time. But I would like to go see all those forts. I'd like to go see the site of the Battle of Lundy's Lane, the bloodiest battle of the War of 1812. It's on the Canadian side, though. I'd like to go see York, which is now Toronto, but I believe they have reconstructions of the fort that was in York, and then the government structures the British government had in York. And well, in 1813, 1814, I believe it actually was, the United States kind of burned York to the ground. And guess what the British did in retaliation? They burned Washington, D.C. to the ground. So we burned their capital. They burned our capital down. It's been 210 years. Let's call it even. So I'd love to go see all of those stops on the Niagara feeder. And then I'd like to swing down to the Erie Maritime Museum, talk about the shipbuilding, how they build it. Hopefully I can get on the replica of the Niagara. And then have to drive across, go along the coast for Ohio, and then go see the Perry Peace Monument to get as close as I physically can to the site of the battle. Because it was just off the coast. It wasn't too far off. So that's a video I'd like to do someday. I've thought about honestly going up sometime in the winter just to the Erie Maritime Museum because I can do that realistically. But if I'm going to go to the Erie Maritime Museum, I want to go to Put Bay as well to say like, well, this is where the battle was actually fought. But even on the American side, there's a naval museum, the Buffalo Naval Museum. I was there when I was a kid, but I would like to go back now I'm an adult. I'd better appreciate it. They got a destroyer, a cruiser, and a submarine, all from World War II preserved. So that's only about an hour up the road. So I guess like if that is open in the winter, maybe that's a winter project. We'll just have to see. Yes, it is. I am not going on the lakes. I will stay near the lakes. I'm not going on the lakes. And I will avoid the lake effect snow when practical. Can you do a retracing history episode on the UFO crash in Roswell? If I'm in New Mexico for some reason, I'm stopping at Roswell. I'm not even gonna laugh at that. I'll go to Roswell, no problem. I've always wanted to do a Mothman video too. Unironically, I've wanted to do a Mothman video, go down to Point Pleasant, West Virginia. But again, I have so many things I want to do, but I gotta find the time, gotta find the money, and I gotta be able to coordinate. I gotta keep my mind, my focus on just one certain subject. If I go on a blitz, I can't just say, I'm going to go here and then here and here and here. I got to plan it out so it's kind of on a linear path so I can maximize my time. There's Burnett with come to Missouri. I want to come. I want to come so badly. I want to come see Wilson's Creek. If you ever visit Missouri, you have to go to St. Genevieve, I'm mispronouncing that. Everything is the same from the 18th century and has a Revolutionary War history. You know, History Savior 1941 is going to Missouri in the near future, and he said there was Revolutionary War stuff. I'm wondering that's what he's going to see, if what you're talking about. Do you have 8 screens on? That's overload. Who else are you listening to, if I may ask? More coherent people than yours truly. More people than yours truly. But hey, I know one thing that may make me convinced to do this blitz because look what we have. Look, at Put Bay, they got a cave, and I'm a sucker for show caves. Perry's Cave Family Fun Center. The main draw is Perry's Cave. Located about 52 feet underground, the cave wasn't discovered until 1813 when Commodore Perry, hero and leader of the Battle of Lake Erie, is credited for finding it. And lucky he did too, because during the war, his troops desperately needed water in these trying times. Perry's Cave is home to a rare underground lake full of fresh water. This underground lake is quite mysterious. It rises and falls with the tides of Lake Erie, but no one knows how they are connected. Water table. It's the water table. The infamous Victory Hotel also used this water before it burned down in 1919. Ooh, infamous. So yeah, I'm kind of tempted to go. I like my show caves. I'm a sucker for show caves. Although it seems more it's like a tourist attraction than like a historical site. But I'm a sucker for show caves. There's a photograph of the cave. Natural limestone cave steeped in historical tradition. Oh, tour is only 20 minutes. I still want to go. There's a show cave near the site of this battle that makes me hooked. I was going to do I want to do a theme month like in January, February called Cavuary. I almost did it last year. Something came up. I was supposed to go to a show cave in central Pennsylvania that has limited days. Like it's literally in a family's basement, but they give you guided tours. You just go to their basement and they tour you through the show cave. But the day I was supposed to go, I was having some vehicular problems and kind of worked out in the end because I ended up going to a friend's party for Thanksgiving. So it all worked out in the end anyways, minus the torrential storm we drove through. But so that I put it on hold. So the idea was January, you did get the Laurel Caverns video, and I was hoping later that month you would go on the video from the Sutter Show Cave. Maybe a future project. All right. I can't imagine Ohio's too far from you. What a 14-hour drive? No, more like just to get to Ohio, it's about 3 hours at most. Nah, 2.5. I'd actually say 2.5 hours just to get to Ohio. Getting to Ohio is not hard for me. Now to get up to where this is, Put Bay, that's near the Toledo side of Ohio. Just to go from where I live to go right to Put-in Bay in the Toledo area, I'm looking at almost a 5-6 hour drive. But if I want to else hit the Maritime Museum, that's a 4-hour drive from where I am to Erie, and then that's probably another like 5-hour drive up to Put-in Bay. So, and there's something I really want to do in Toledo, but they're not open in the winter, and it's when I'm most available. So, like again, if I'm gonna do this, I'm just gonna do the whole linear thing. I'm gonna start at Fort Niagara and just work my way through Buffalo, through Erie, hit a few things in northern Ohio, and then hit Put-in Bay, and then end Toledo, or maybe hit stuff some on one way, hit some on the other. I don't know too. It's in the planning phase. All right, I gotta wrap this up. So I got 2 things to shill tonight. So first, I reached out on the Gilded earlier tonight, and I'm like, well, I'm doing kind of doing a maritime theme tonight, so I want to talk about something maritime, something from some new creation, from a new creation from a new and up and coming author, or just simply creator that's maritime related. And I think it was Gino who's on Guild. It's like, I remember somebody was saying something a few weeks ago on one of a Drink with Crazy streams. We couldn't remember it. I don't know if this is it for certain, but the gentleman actually stepped forward and shared the link to me for this, so I have to shill it. So this is A Kiniwazi Saga. A Kiniwazi Saga. A Kiniwazi Saga. Say that 5 times. A Kiniwazi Saga, A Light Rises in a Dark World by M.D. Boncher. Bochner, I'm mispronouncing that. I apologize. MDB. We'll call you MDB. We'll call you MDB. And let's see what it's about. Book 1 of Akiniwazaki. Oh, I gotta end the stream. Akiniwazi Saga. What determines the value of a soul? Despite young Ramar's heroics, his farmhold's crops are burned in a savage raid. Desperate, the village elders petition for help from the search for enough food to survive the fast approaching winter. But the local parish is flooded with pleas from many others in similar need, and aid is short. Brother Finn is stranded on his way into exile by a Viking attack that damaged his ship. On pain of death, he must reach his appointed sanctuary before winter freezes the lakes. Caring nothing for the consequences Brother Finn might suffer, the local priest whose authority he is under orders him to aid in the distribution of alms. Finn is sent to Ramar's farmhold to gauge what he can do. Discovering the farmhold's needs, Brother Finn brokers a trade to make up the difference. 7 children will be given to the church in exchange for the food needed to survive. Having created the deal, Brother Finn is forced to finish what has started. He must escort Ramar and the other 6 children to St. Martin's Academy for training. He must shepherd them across the rugged lands and lakes of Kiniwazi by train and ship. A gauntlet of dangers filled hostile savages, Vikings, killer storms, and demons. Can Brother Finn reach his sanctuary before the snow comes? Will Ramar and the children survive their journey to a better life? Ooh, very cool. And I was told by the author that it takes about 50 pages before we get to the maritime stuff. But once we get there, we have good fun times on ships, on high seas, very rough seas. Oh, look at that artwork. So cool. I want the pointy thing. I want that on my wall. Can I have that pointy thing on my wall? So I'm going to presume this is a fantasy world, because Viking initially I thought, okay, this is kind of like historical fiction. No, this seems full fantasy, and then Vikings are just a group of people that are in this world. So cool. And it is available right now on Amazon. And you can get it for Kindle. I'm sorry, guys. I'm getting so tongue twisted. This is so unprofessional. It's on Kindle for $3.99, or you can get the hardcover for $16.92, or you could pay a few more cents and get the paperback for $16.99. So get the hardcover. Yes, sounds like a fun adventure. The first of 3 books of the Akiniwazi Saga series. There's the link for Akiniwazi Saga. There you are. And then one other thing I'm going to shield before we finish up. I believe Stormcrow mentioned this a while back. This is Blood and Oak by Garrett Betancourt. In 1798, the Barbary pirates stole his freedom. Now John Sullivan wants blood. Growing up on his father's ship was an adventure for young John. His world crumbled the day the Barbary pirates took him away in chains, along with his mother and sister. 5 years later, after a daring escape to America, John is eager to join USS Philadelphia and meet the crosshairs with steel. Then, one stormy night, a stranger brings word his sister Caitlin is alive. John must risk everything on a bold plan to sail to the Barbary coast. To defy the odds and free his family, he wielded his skill with a blade, his leadership in battle, and his wits at sea. In his path, cutthroat smugglers, ruthless pirates, and a deadly foe bent on destruction. Yet, in John Sullivan's heart, the fires of revenge blaze even hotter, threatening to burn those he loves. In his bid to save the lost, he may find his most dangerous enemy lies within. Blood and Oak is Book 1 in the Blood and Oak series. Book 1 and Book 2 are currently available. Very cool, very cool. And just a little bit down here about the offer. Betancourt always loved telling stories, from the illustrated travels of a shipwrecked boy when he was 8 to a novel of pirate adventures when he reached high school. His love of adventure and an unexplored gave him a passion for space, science, history, high fantasy, and the ocean. His penchant for all things nautical led him to spend 2.5 years researching the early U.S. Navy. The result is Book 1 of Blood and Oak, and an epic series of swashbuckling high-sea adventures. So yes. So if this is more proper historical fiction. So if this sounds like it's up your alley, let's see. I want to share it, but I don't like the link. It looks really gibberish. Oh, share? Copy link? Oh, let's see if this works. Duh, maybe I should just hit the link copy. That might work. Oh, cool. He also has a YouTube channel called Swords and Starships. Wow, that cool. I like that title. He goes by Captain Garrett. I don't know if that's going to work for certain. But Blood and Oak by Garrett Betancourt, who has a YouTube channel as well called Swords and Starship. So he definitely seems, he would scratch my itch for historical fiction, where A Keniwaza Saga is going to be more of a fantasy series, taking some historical inspiration, I can tell. But both seem to be great swashbuckling tales, if that is what you're looking for. Well, guys, that wraps up today's stream. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed all my pratfalls. It says we've been streaming for 1 hour and 16 minutes. I probably could have hit this in only an hour, but again, I had a lot of verbal pratfalls there in the last third. I greatly apologize, but I'm having a lot of fun, and I'm also getting a little bit tired. But before I head off, I want to mention we'll be streaming again tomorrow, actually. If all goes well, we'll be back on the air 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, both here on YouTube and Rumble, because I have another guest coming on. And that's going to be James Esparza, the mastermind with World Without End. I've been wanting to get him on for quite some time. So finally had the chance. Seems like the stars are aligned. We're going to talk about what historical elements inspired his world building. Talk about some of his projects he's been up to in his world. I'm not ignoring you. I'm not ignoring you, Maji. I saw 7 hours from Gettysburg to Perry's Gay. Are we measuring things in Gettysburg time? I don't live in Gettysburg, but if I lived in Gettysburg, I would. You know, the truth is, everybody always wants to live like the places they vacation. I actually don't. So as much as I adore going to Gettysburg, I would never want to live in Gettysburg. Now, would I want to live in Adams County, Pennsylvania? If I had the chance, absolutely. It is a beautiful, well-kept county. The county's one of its major commodities is actually apples. That's one of its major farming outputs is apples. It's still pretty prevalent. So huge apple fields and farm fields all around Gettysburg with a lot of small towns. So Gettysburg itself is beautiful, but the whole county is beautiful. I don't know if I could actually live in Gettysburg, though. Well, there's 10 major roads that go into Gettysburg, which is to this day makes it a traffic nightmare. And I may or may not have lost one of my cars because of that. We won't talk anymore on that. So, but I guess no one read up my channel. Yeah, measure everything through Gettysburg. Yeah, I can. Means it's actually closer than 7 hours. I'll take that. But I appreciate it. Again, there's a lot of things I want to do. Next year for the channel. But I gotta stop being scatterbrained. I gotta get my brain more clear when it comes to planning my trips and doing the research for the trip. So when I go on the site, I can speak more fluently, and I don't just have. I just don't go. I don't lose all my thoughts because I'm just so in awe of the location. I mean, believe me, now the me tripping up during the Bloody Lane video, that was from all the gnats. Yeah, they were bad. They were bad in that video. So anytime I was standing still, they would just come flying in front of me or nearly go into the mouth and choke me. But there's places I'll go to and I'll have books full of notes. And then I'm at the site and I'm like, so all I end up doing is just getting a bunch of quick shots at many different angles and have to edit and post, which is really embarrassing to me because my living is talking history. I talk about history on location. So I'd like to be able to do more talking on location videos. That is my strength. At least I think it is. But who knows anymore? Who knows? So yeah, definitely I got to do a lot more planning, got to get a lot more serious. And I have a lot of ideas, so many places I want to go, like the Niagara, what I would call it, the Niagara Blitz, going from Fort Niagara down Lake Ontario, down Lake Erie. I'd love to do that. The big one, though, me and my friend want to do is going to the Carolina border to go see the Revolutionary War battlefields. Kings Mountain, where he actually has a relative attached to it, Cowpens, and then on the way home, hit Guilford Courthouse, and just hit a few other cool things that are in the area. So many ideas, so many ideas. I probably should go to bed and leave those ideas as good dreams. So with that out of the way, folks, I'd like to thank you for watching. We will see you tomorrow as we will have James Esparza of World Without End on at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, I'm going to shut up and just play the music. Get it?